I'm Emily Harper, 29, and last month I was ready to buy my dream house after saving $390,000 over 10 years. I worked multiple jobs, lived in a tiny apartment, and sacrificed everything for this moment. Then I discovered my parents had emptied my account. When I confronted them, my father smiled coldly and said, "Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future." I couldn't hold back my laughter. If you're wondering why, let me tell you where this began. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button to join me through this wild journey of betrayal and unexpected triumph. Growing up in Boston with Diane and Richard Harper wasn't easy. From my earliest memories, my parents maintained ironclad control over every aspect of my life. My clothing choices, friendship circles, extracurricular activities, even the books I read were subject to their approval. Nothing in our sprawling colonial house was truly mine. Privacy was a foreign concept. "We're only looking out for your best interests," my mother would say, while systematically dismantling any sense of autonomy I tried to build. She was a marketing executive who treated parenting like another project to be managed with clinical precision. My father, a financial advisor with a reputation for aggressive investment strategies, controlled the family finances with similar rigidity. "Money isn't for children to worry about," he'd say whenever I asked about savings or allowance. Meanwhile, he documented every penny I spent in a little black notebook that lived in his desk drawer. The stark contrast in how they treated my younger brother Tyler made their controlling behavior toward me even more apparent. 4 years my junior, Tyler could seemingly do no wrong. His room was his sanctuary, his choices rarely questioned. My parents funded his hobbies generously, from expensive gaming equipment to travel soccer leagues. When he wrecked his first car at 17, they bought him a newer, better one without a lecture. "Boys will be boys," my mother would shrug, while I received a 2-hour lecture for coming home 15 minutes past curfew. Perhaps their favoritism toward Tyler was what pushed me toward financial independence so early. At 16, I got my first job at a local coffee shop, hiding tips in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. By 18, I'd saved enough for my first semester of community college, which I attended while working full-time. My parents were furious when I moved out at 19, taking my meager savings and thrift store furniture to a shared apartment 30 minutes away. "You're making a terrible mistake," my father warned. "You'll be back within 6 months." Instead, I thrived. I transferred to a 4-year college on partial scholarship, majoring in computer science. By 22, I'd landed an entry-level position at a small tech company, and by 25, I'd worked my way up to a senior developer role. My savings strategy was methodical. 30% of every paycheck went into a high-yield savings account. I lived with roommates, drove a 15-year-old car, cooked meals at home, and bought clothes secondhand. Every bonus, tax refund, and side gig payment went straight into savings. My spreadsheets tracked every dollar, projecting exactly when I'd reach my goal of $400,000 for a house down payment and emergency fund. My relationship with my parents remained strained but civil during those years. I visited on major holidays, called once a week, and deflected their probing questions about my finances. "I'm doing fine," became my standard response. When I met Jessica at a tech conference 3 years ago, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. She was brilliant, funny, and understood my drive for independence without me having to explain. After a year of dating, we moved in together, further reducing my living expenses and accelerating my savings timeline. It was Jessica who encouraged me to start house hunting 6 months ago, even though I was $10,000 short of my goal. "Real estate in this area isn't getting cheaper," she pointed out logically, "and interest rates are still reasonable. It makes sense to start looking now." We spent weekends touring open houses, gradually refining our wish list. 3 bedrooms, a home office, a decent kitchen, a small yard, and most importantly, a location that wouldn't require a soul-crushing commute to either of our jobs. When we found the perfect house in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, I knew immediately. The three-bedroom Craftsman with original woodwork and an updated kitchen was listed at $385,000, almost exactly matching my savings. "We could put an office in the smallest bedroom," Jessica said as we wandered through the sunlit rooms during our second viewing. "And the backyard has enough space for that garden you've always wanted." For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to picture a future that felt completely my own. A home that no one could control or take away from me. A foundation for the life I'd been working toward for a decade. My parents, predictably, were less enthusiastic. "Home ownership is a trap at your age," my father insisted during a Sunday phone call. "You'll be tied down with maintenance and property taxes when you should be focusing on career advancement. And why rush into such a commitment?" My mother added, "You're still so young, plenty of time to settle down later." Their reaction was expected, so I didn't share further details about the house or my plans to make an offer. Which is why I was confused when, during our next family dinner, my father mentioned the beautiful oak cabinets in the kitchen of the house I was considering. I hadn't told them about the oak cabinets. "How did you know about that?" I asked, fork pausing midway to my mouth. My father looked momentarily flustered before recovering. "You must have mentioned it during our last call." I knew I hadn't, but I let it slide, attributing it to coincidence, or perhaps Jessica mentioning it during a separate conversation with them. Looking back, that moment should have been my first warning that something wasn't right. The first concrete sign that something was wrong came 3 days after that dinner, when my phone buzzed with a notification I didn't recognize. "Account access confirmed from new device." I frowned at the alert from my banking app, which I hadn't opened that day. I immediately logged in through my secure browser and checked my recent activity. Everything looked normal. No unauthorized transactions. Still, the notification bothered me enough that I called the bank's customer service line. "We show a login from a new IP address at 2:15 p.m. today," the representative confirmed after verifying my identity. "It appears to be from within your state. Would you like us to lock your account and issue new credentials?" Since nothing seemed amiss with my balance or transaction history, I opted for a password change instead, assuming I'd perhaps logged in from work and forgotten. Still, a nagging sense of unease lingered. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, I received an email notification about a successful login from an unrecognized device. I immediately called the bank again, this time speaking with a security specialist named Marcus. "Ms. Harper, I'm showing multiple access points to your account over the past week," he explained after reviewing my records. "Some appear to be from mobile devices not registered to your profile." "Is anything missing?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "Has anyone transferred money out?" "I don't see any unauthorized transfers yet, but there have been several inquiries about wire transfer procedures," Marcus replied. "Would you like me to place a temporary freeze on your account while we investigate further?" I agreed immediately, setting up additional security protocols, including a requirement for verbal confirmation of any transfers over $1,000. Marcus assured me they would monitor my account closely and suggested I run a security scan on all my devices. That evening, I did exactly that, starting with my phone and then moving to my laptop. Nothing appeared unusual until I ran a deep system scan on my personal computer, the one I'd had for about 3 years and primarily used for managing my finances and personal projects. The scan revealed an unfamiliar program running quietly in the background, something that didn't appear in my regular programs list. After some research and a call to a tech-savvy friend, I discovered it was a sophisticated tracking software that could record keystrokes, capture screenshots, and essentially monitor everything I did on my computer. My blood ran cold as I tried to determine when and how this software had been installed. Then I remembered. About 4 months earlier, my laptop had been running slowly, and during a visit to my parents' house, my father had offered to clean it up for me. I'll run some diagnostics and optimization programs, he'd said, taking my computer into his home office for several hours. You know this is what I do for clients all the time. He'd returned it later that evening, noticeably faster and good as new. I'd thanked him, never suspecting he'd used the opportunity to install spyware. With growing dread, I realized this meant my parents had potentially been monitoring my financial activities for months. They would have seen my online banking sessions, my house hunting searches, every email about mortgage pre-approval, and even conversations with Jessica about our future plans. My hands shaking, I logged into my main savings account using Jessica's tablet, bypassing the temporary freeze with a phone verification. The balance read $0. Where there should have been $390,000, the result of 10 years of disciplined saving and sacrifice, there was nothing. I frantically checked my transaction history to find a wire transfer completed the previous day, sending the entire balance to an account I didn't recognize. The room spun around me as Jessica rushed over, alarmed by the sound that came out of my throat, something between a gasp and a scream. "Emily, what's wrong?" she asked, gripping my shoulders as I stared blankly at the screen. "It's gone," I whispered. "Everything. 10 years of savings, the house, our future, it's all gone." Jessica took the tablet, quickly scanning the information. "This has to be fraud," she said firmly. "We'll call the bank right now and report it. They can reverse wire transfers if we act quickly." But as I regained my composure and looked more closely at the transfer details, a sickening realization dawned. The receiving account holder information included a name I recognized all too well: Richard Harper, my father. "It's not fraud," I said quietly. "It's my parents." I tried calling them immediately, but neither answered. Text messages went unread. I even emailed both their personal and work addresses with the subject line, "Emergency, please contact me," but received no response. By morning, after a sleepless night pacing our apartment, I'd left 6 voicemails and sent countless messages. The silence was deafening, and in that silence, my shock transformed into something harder, more resolute. "I'm going over there," I told Jessica as I grabbed my car keys. "Today." "I'm coming with you," she replied, already reaching for her jacket. I shook my head. "I need to do this alone, but I'll call you immediately if I need backup." As I drove the 40 minutes to my parents' suburban home, my mind raced through possible explanations, each more implausible than the last. Perhaps it was a terrible mistake. Maybe they were trying to protect the money somehow. Could they have transferred it to a better investment vehicle as a misguided surprise? But the tracking software on my computer told a different story. This was calculated, deliberate, a violation so profound I could barely process it. The familiar tree-lined street where I grew up looked exactly the same as always: neatly trimmed hedges, freshly mulched flower beds, the American flag flying from the front porch, everything in its proper place, just as my parents preferred. Parked in the driveway behind my father's luxury sedan, and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I walked up the brick pathway and rang the doorbell, though I still had a key somewhere in my apartment. My mother answered, her expression shifting from surprise to something carefully neutral when she saw me. "Emily," she said, stepping back to let me in. "This is unexpected. We usually do Sunday dinners, not Tuesday drop-ins." "Is Dad home?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "In his study." "Is everything all right?" I didn't answer, just walked past her toward my father's home office. He looked up from his computer as I entered, removing his reading glasses. "Emily," he said, smiling blandly. "What brings you by on a weekday?" I closed the door behind me, suddenly aware of how calm I felt. Beyond anger. Beyond shock. Something crystalline and clear had formed in my chest. "I know what you did," I said simply. My father's expression didn't change. "You'll need to be more specific." $390,000, Transferred yesterday from my savings account to yours, and the tracking software you installed on my laptop when you supposedly fixed it. A flicker of something, not quite guilt, but perhaps surprise that I'd discovered everything so quickly. Then his face settled into firm resolve. "Sit down, Emily," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. The same chair where I'd sat for countless lectures throughout my childhood. I remained standing. "Where is my money?" I asked. My mother entered then, closing the door softly behind her. "Richard," she said quietly. "She knows." "Of course she knows," he replied. "Sooner than we expected. But that doesn't change anything." He turned back to me. "The money is safe," he said, as if that answered everything. "We made a family decision about its best use." "A family decision?" I repeated incredulously. "You made a decision about my money that I've saved for 10 years without even talking to me? That's not a family decision. That's theft." "Don't be dramatic," my mother cut in, her voice sharp. "We're your parents. We've always known what's best for you, even when you can't see it yourself." "I'm 29 years old. I have a successful career, a relationship, and until yesterday I had a plan to buy a house. You had no right to interfere." My father stood, his height still imposing even though I was an adult now. "We had every right. You were about to make a terrible financial mistake, tying up all your liquid assets in an overpriced property in a market that's about to turn. We protected you from yourself." "By stealing from me?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "By reallocating family resources where they'll do the most good," he corrected. "Your brother has been accepted to an elite business school, and he has a startup idea that needs capital. His education and business will benefit this family for generations." As if on cue, the front door opened and closed, and moments later, my brother Tyler appeared in the doorway of the study, looking confused at finding us all there. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between us. "Nothing that concerns you," my mother said quickly. "Actually," I said, turning to face him, "they just stole my entire savings account to give to you. $390,000 that I've been saving for 10 years to buy a house. Apparently, your education and business idea are more important than my future." Tyler's eyes widened. "What? That can't be right." He looked at our parents. "Tell me that's not true." My father's expression hardened. "Emily is being selfish as usual. We made a decision that benefits the family as a whole." "By stealing her money?" Tyler asked incredulously. "It's not stealing when it's for your child's own good," my mother insisted. "Emily was about to waste all that money on a house she doesn't need at her age. Your future is more promising." Tyler looked horrified. "I never asked for that." "I would never want her money taken from me." My father waved his hand dismissively. "You'll understand when you're older. Both of you. Sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions." He turned to me, his expression smug. "Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future." And then, to everyone's surprise, including my own, I started laughing. Not a small chuckle, but full-bodied laughter that bent me at the waist. My parents exchanged concerned glances. "Emily," my mother said cautiously, "are you all right?" I straightened, wiping tears from my eyes. "I'm better than all right. I'm fantastic." "Because you didn't get what you think you got." My father's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" $390,000 is what I had in total savings, I explained, still smiling. But last week, after getting pre-approved, for a mortgage, I moved $351,000 to a separate secure account at a different bank. One that you didn't know about. The account you emptied only had $39,000 in it. The color drained from my father's face. "That's not possible. We monitored your main account. You never made any large transfers." "No, I didn't," I agreed. "Because after I noticed some strange activities on my account, I went to the bank in person and arranged for a banker to help me transfer the funds physically, with no digital trail. I was planning to surprise Jessica with the good news that we could make an offer on the house with extra funds for renovations. My mother sank into a chair. "You're lying." "Call the bank if you don't believe me," I replied. "Though I'm not sure. You want to draw more attention to what you've done." Tyler moved to stand beside me. "I want no part of this," he said firmly. "Whatever they took from you, I don't want it, and I'll help you get it back." My father's shock quickly transformed into anger. "You ungrateful children. After everything we've done for you." "What you've done," I said, my voice steady, "is commit fraud and theft. You installed spyware on my computer without my knowledge or consent. You used that information to access my bank account without authorization, and you transferred funds that didn't belong to you. That's not parenting. That's criminal." "You wouldn't press charges against your own parents," my mother said, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Watch me," I replied. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You have 24 hours to return my $39,000. After that, I'm going to the police with evidence of everything you've done." As Tyler and I walked out together, leaving our parents stunned in the study, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying my entire life. My 24-hour deadline came and went with no money returned and no communication from my parents. True to my word, I filed a police report the following morning, bringing copies of bank statements, screenshots of the unauthorized wire transfer, and evidence of the spyware found on my computer. Detective Kimberly Walsh took my statement, her expression growing increasingly serious as I explained the situation. "Unfortunately, we see cases like this more often than you might think," she told me. "Family financial exploitation is surprisingly common, though your parents' methods were unusually sophisticated." She explained that they would investigate, but also recommended I consult with an attorney who specialized in financial crimes. "Criminal charges are one avenue," she said, "but civil action may be your best bet for recovering the funds quickly." Through a colleague's recommendation, I found Sarah Williams, an attorney who had previously handled several cases involving parental financial abuse of adult children. Her office was small but impeccably professional, and she listened intently as I recounted my story. "First things first," she said when I'd finished. "We'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze the funds they took so they can't spend or hide them. Then we'll proceed with both civil claims for the return of your money plus damages and work with the police on potential criminal charges." True to her word, Sarah moved quickly. By the end of the week, a judge had granted our request to freeze my parents' accounts where my money had been deposited. The formal complaint filed against them included charges of theft, fraud, unauthorized computer access, and invasion of privacy. My parents' response was swift and predictable. They hired Bradford Montgomery, one of the most expensive attorneys in the city, known for representing wealthy clients in complex financial disputes. Their formal response to our complaint was a blend of denial and justification, claiming they had acted out of parental concern and fiduciary duty. More shocking was their countersuit, alleging that I had borrowed money from them throughout my early adulthood with a verbal agreement to repay it, and that the $39,000 they took was simply collection of this family debt. "This is completely fabricated," I told Sarah when she showed me their filing. "I've never borrowed money from them as an adult. In fact, I've been financially independent since I was 19. "I believe you," she assured me, "but we'll need to gather evidence to refute their claims. Bank records showing your income and expenses over the years. Testimonials from friends or colleagues who can attest to your financial independence. Anything that contradicts their narrative." The case quickly drew attention beyond our family. The local news ran a story about modern digital privacy concerns, without naming us directly, but clearly referencing our situation. My inbox filled with messages from friends, colleagues, and even a few distant relatives, all expressing varying degrees of shock, support, or in some cases, criticism for taking legal action against my own parents. The most painful messages came from my mother's sister, Aunt Lauren, who had always been kind to me growing up. Family matters should stay within the family, she wrote. Your parents may have made a mistake, but dragging them through the courts will only destroy any chance of reconciliation. Is that really what you want? What I wanted, I realized, was something my aunt couldn't understand: accountability. For once in my life, I wanted my parents to face consequences for their controlling behavior, rather than being allowed to rewrite reality to suit their preferences. Jessica proved to be my steadfast support through all of this. She took days off work to accompany me to meetings with Sarah, organized our growing file of evidence, and held me on the nights when the stress and hurt finally caught up with me. You're doing the right thing, she would whisper as I cried against her shoulder. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you a bad daughter. They broke your trust in the most fundamental way. Tyler, too, surprised me with his unwavering support. Despite pressure from our parents and extended family, he provided a written statement confirming he had never asked for or wanted my money, and detailing the pattern of favoritism and control he had witnessed growing up. I've always felt guilty about how differently they treated us, he confessed during a lunch meeting with me and Sarah. But I never thought they'd go this far. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. The most difficult part of the legal process was the deposition, where I had to sit across from my parents and their attorney while answering questions for hours. They looked smaller somehow, my mother's perfectly maintained appearance showing cracks of stress, my father's confident posture diminished. Bradford Montgomery, their attorney, tried repeatedly to paint me as ungrateful, financially irresponsible, and vindictive. Isn't it true, he asked, peering over his glasses, that your parents repeatedly advised you against purchasing property at your age, showing financial wisdom you chose to ignore? They expressed their opinion, I replied carefully, as Sarah had coached me. But opinions don't entitle them to access my bank account without permission or install spyware on my computer. And isn't it true that your brother's education and business prospects represent a better long-term investment for family resources than an overpriced house in a volatile market? Sarah objected before I could answer. Family resources implies joint ownership. The funds in question were the sole property of my client, earned through her employment and systematically saved over a decade. As the weeks stretched into months, the emotional and financial toll of the legal battle grew. The house Jessica and I had fallen in love with sold to another buyer. My parents began a whisper campaign among family friends, suggesting I had mental health issues that had led to false accusations against them. There were moments when settling seemed tempting, just to end the ongoing stress. But every time I considered it, I remembered my father's smug expression as he said those words. Thanks for your naivety. Your money has now secured your brother's bright future. As if my decade of hard work and sacrifice meant nothing. As if I existed only to further his preferred child's opportunities. So we pressed on. Sarah gathered digital forensics experts who testified about the sophisticated nature of the spyware installed on my computer and traced its installation directly to the time period when my father had possession of my laptop. Bank records clearly showed my consistent pattern of saving over 10 years, contradicting my parents' claims of debt repayment. The case was scheduled for court, with a hearing date set for exactly 3 months after my initial discovery of the theft. Despite my parents' attempts to delay, the judge denied their motions, citing the straightforward nature of the evidence. As we prepared for our day in court, Sarah received an unexpected phone call. Bradford Montgomery wanted to discuss settlement terms. My parents, it seemed, had finally realized they might not win this battle. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that seemed too harsh for the weight of what was about to unfold. I sat beside Sarah at the plaintiff's table, my back straight despite the knot of tension between my shoulder blades. Across the aisle, my parents sat with Bradford Montgomery, neither looking in my direction. Judge Patricia Alvarez entered, and the proceedings began with opening statements. Sarah went first, her voice clear and confident as she laid out the facts of the case without emotional embellishment. This case is fundamentally about violation, she concluded. violation of privacy through unauthorized surveillance software, violation of financial autonomy through unauthorized account access, and, most painfully, violation of the sacred trust between parent and child. Bradford Montgomery's opening painted a different picture, portraying my parents as concerned mentors who had tried to guide their impulsive daughter away from financial ruin. The Harpers have decades of financial expertise between them, he argued smoothly. They witnessed their daughter about to commit her entire savings to an overpriced property in a precarious market. Their actions, while perhaps overzealous, were motivated by parental protection, not criminal intent. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt both numb and shaky. After being sworn in, I looked out at the courtroom, briefly meeting Jessica's encouraging gaze from the gallery. "Ms. Harper," Sarah began gently, "please tell the court about your financial history since becoming an adult." I described my path to independence, the multiple jobs, the careful budgeting, the systematic saving, all documented in the financial records already submitted as evidence. I explained my dream of homeownership and the security it represented to me. "And when did you first suspect something was wrong with your account?" Sarah prompted. I detailed the strange notifications, the discovery of the spyware, and the devastating moment when I realized my entire savings had vanished, transferred to an account in my father's name. "Did you ever give your parents permission to access your financial accounts?" "No, never." "Did you ever agree that your savings should go toward your brother's education or business ventures?" "Absolutely not." "And how has this incident affected you, Ms. Harper?" I paused, gathering my thoughts. Beyond the obvious financial impact, it's shattered my sense of security. The two people who were supposed to protect me instead exploited my trust in the most intimate way possible, monitoring my private communications and taking what I'd worked so hard to build. There are moments I still can't believe it's real. Bradford Montgomery's cross-examination was aggressive, as expected. He questioned my financial knowledge compared to my father's expertise. He implied that my decision to buy a house was emotionally driven rather than financially sound. He even suggested that my parents had discussed their concerns with me multiple times, and I had stubbornly refused to listen. "No," I corrected firmly. "They expressed opinions about my house hunting. Yes, but at no point did they say, 'We're considering taking your money for your brother instead.' That's not a conversation we ever had." The digital forensics expert who examined my computer was next, methodically explaining how the spyware worked, when it was installed, and the extent of surveillance it enabled. "This software captures keystrokes, including passwords," she explained to the visibly disturbed judge. "It takes periodic screenshots without the user's knowledge and uploads them to a remote server. It can even activate the computer's camera and microphone remotely. This is not consumer-grade parental monitoring software, but rather sophisticated surveillance technology, typically used in corporate espionage or by private investigators." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat as she detailed the exact date and time the software was installed, matching precisely to when he had taken my laptop to fix it. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. The bank manager who had helped me transfer the majority of my savings to a secure account took the stand, confirming that I had come to the bank in person, expressed concerns about unusual account activity, and asked for assistance in protecting my assets. Ms. Harper specifically mentioned feeling that someone might be monitoring her online banking activity, he recalled. She requested that we handle the transfer with no digital notification or electronic trail, which is unusual but not unprecedented when clients have security concerns. This testimony directly contradicted my parents' claim that I had fabricated the story about transferring most of my money before they accessed my account. The real surprise of the day came during my brother Tyler's testimony. I had expected him to confirm his written statement about never asking for my money, but he went much further. "My parents have always treated Emily and me differently," he stated clearly. "Growing up, I received opportunities, trust, and resources that she didn't, for no reason except that I was their son and she was their daughter." A murmur ran through the courtroom as he continued. When I learned what they had done with Emily's money, supposedly for my benefit, I was horrified. But I wasn't entirely surprised. This fits a pattern of control they've maintained over her for as long as I can remember. Then, voice steady, he revealed something I hadn't known. After Emily discovered what happened, our parents approached me with $50,000 to start my business immediately, saying it was my portion of a family investment. When I refused it and said I would support Emily in court if necessary, they threatened to withdraw funding for my education entirely. My mother made a small sound from her seat, and my father's face flushed dark red. "Tyler, that's enough," he said sharply, earning a quick reprimand from the judge about speaking out of turn. As the first day of proceedings ended, Sarah looked cautiously optimistic. "The judge seems troubled by the evidence," she whispered as we gathered our things. "Particularly the sophisticated nature of the spyware and your brother's testimony." The second day brought an unexpected development. Before proceedings began, Bradford Montgomery requested a brief recess to speak with his clients. When court resumed 30 minutes later, he approached the bench. "Your Honor, my clients would like to propose a settlement." The terms were straightforward. Full return of the $39,000, plus $20,000 in damages to cover my legal fees and emotional distress. In exchange, I would drop all claims and agree not to pursue criminal charges. Judge Alvarez turned to me. "Ms. Harper, are these terms acceptable to you?" I looked at my parents, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. My mother's perfect posture, my father's confident facade, both now showing cracks under pressure. They had monitored my most private communications, violated my trust, taken what wasn't theirs, all while believing they were entitled to control my life even as an adult. "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "Those terms are not acceptable." Bradford. Montgomery looked stunned. Sarah leaned close to me, whispering urgently, "Emily, this is a reasonable offer. We should consider it." "I've spent my entire life being reasonable while they've been controlling," I replied quietly. "I want the court to decide." And so the proceedings continued. Financial records from my parents' accounts revealed something I hadn't known. They had been experiencing significant financial pressure themselves. My father's investment firm had lost several major clients in the past year. Their mortgage was underwater after a poorly timed refinance. Tyler's elite business school tuition was beyond what they could comfortably afford. They had taken my money not just out of a desire to control me or favor my brother, but out of desperation to maintain appearances and expectations that they could no longer financially support. This revelation didn't excuse their actions, but it provided context that helped me understand the frantic violation of boundaries. They were drowning and saw my savings as a life raft, justifying the theft through a lifetime of paternalistic control. In her closing argument, Sarah emphasized the deliberate nature of my parents' actions. "This was not a momentary lapse in judgment," she stated firmly. "It was a calculated series of invasions executed over months, culminating in the theft of my client's life savings. The court must send a clear message that family ties do not exempt anyone from basic legal and ethical boundaries." Bradford Montgomery's closing was more subdued than his opening had been, focusing primarily on my parents' previously unblemished reputation in the community and their sincere belief that they were acting in the family's best interest. Judge Alvarez took a day to consider her ruling. When we returned to court, the tension was palpable. "In the case of Harper versus Harper," she began, her voice stern, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant's actions constitute a clear violation of multiple statutes regarding privacy, unauthorized computer access, and financial fraud. She ordered my parents to return the full $39,000, plus $50,000 in punitive damages, and granted a permanent injunction barring them from any contact with my financial institutions or electronic devices. While the court acknowledges the special relationship between parents and children," she added, looking directly at my parents, "that relationship does not confer ownership or control of an adult child's assets. Ms. Harper has demonstrated admirable financial responsibility and independence. The paternalistic overreach demonstrated by the defendants is particularly troubling, given the sophisticated methods employed. As a final point, she noted that she would be referring the case to the district attorney's office for consideration of criminal charges, though the decision to prosecute would be at their discretion. My parents sat motionless as the ruling was read, my father's face pale, my mother's eyes downcast. They had lost not just the case, but the carefully constructed narrative they'd built around their actions, their parenting, and their own financial stability. As we left the courtroom, Tyler caught up with me in the hallway. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his eyes. I considered the question seriously. "Not yet," I answered honestly. "But I will be." The weeks following the court ruling brought both practical challenges and emotional upheaval. My parents complied with the financial judgment promptly, likely hoping to minimize their exposure to potential criminal charges. The district attorney ultimately decided not to pursue criminal prosecution, citing my parents' clean prior record and the full financial restitution already made. With the return of my $39,000 plus the additional $50,000 in damages, I now had even more than my original savings goal. Jessica and I resumed house hunting, though the market had shifted slightly in the months of legal proceedings. "What about this one?" Jessica asked one Saturday morning in bed, her tablet propped against her knees as she scrolled through listings. 4 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, about 10 minutes farther from downtown than we were looking before. The house was beautiful, slightly larger than our original target, with a wraparound porch and established garden. The price was within our budget, especially now. "It's perfect," I said, a flutter of excitement replacing the knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for months. "Let's see it today." 2 weeks later, our offer was accepted. As we signed the mountain of paperwork at closing, I felt a surreal sense of accomplishment. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and legal battle and public exposure, I had achieved what I'd worked toward for 10 years. "Congratulations, homeowners," the real estate agent said, handing us the keys with a flourish. That night, Jessica and I sat on the bare floor of our new living room, sharing takeout and champagne by the light of a single-floor lamp we'd brought from our apartment. "To new beginnings," Jessica toasted, her glass clinking against mine, "and to hard lessons learned," I added quietly. The emotional fallout from the case was more complicated than the practical aspects. I established firm boundaries with my parents, including no unannounced visits to our new home and no discussions of my finances, ever. Our interactions were limited to brief, civil exchanges at family gatherings, which I attended primarily to maintain my relationship with Tyler. My brother had moved out of our parents' home shortly after the court case concluded, renting a small apartment near his university. He was pursuing his business degree, but with student loans and part-time work rather than parental funding. "It's harder this way," he admitted when he came over to help us paint the new living room. "But it feels more honest somehow, like I'm building something that's truly mine." I understood completely. My parents made several attempts at reconciliation, each revealing how little they'd actually changed. My mother sent an elaborate housewarming gift with a card that read, "We hope you'll now see that everything worked out for the best in the end." My father called on my birthday with an investment opportunity he thought would be perfect for that settlement money, apparently having learned nothing about respecting my financial autonomy. Each time, I politely but firmly reinforced my boundaries, refusing to be drawn into their preferred narrative that the entire episode had been an unfortunate misunderstanding, now happily resolved. "They still don't get it," I told my therapist, Dr. Andrea Reeves, during one of our weekly sessions. I had started therapy shortly after the court case, recognizing that legal resolution hadn't automatically healed the emotional wounds. "They see the outcome, the house, the money, but they don't understand what they destroyed. Trust once broken is incredibly difficult to rebuild," Dr. Reeves agreed. especially when the breaching party doesn't fully acknowledge the violation. Your parents may never truly understand the impact of their actions. Your healing can't depend on their recognition. That was perhaps the hardest lesson, accepting that my parents might never genuinely understand or apologize for what they'd done. My choice was to either continue hoping for a validation that might never come, or to build my life and healing independent of their acknowledgement. I chose the latter path. Jessica and I created our home together, filling it with furniture we loved, painting the walls colors that made us happy, and gradually transforming it into a sanctuary that felt entirely our own. We established traditions and rhythms that had nothing to do with my family of origin. The professional consequences of the case surprised me. While I'd worried about potential embarrassment or career damage from the public court proceedings, the opposite occurred. My story resonated with many people, particularly young professionals navigating complex family financial dynamics. At a tech conference 6 months after the case concluded, I was approached by a senior developer from a major cybersecurity firm. "Your experience was unfortunately common," she told me over coffee. "The technical aspects of your case, combined with your background in development, make you uniquely qualified to understand both the emotional and technical dimensions of privacy violations. We have an opening on our family security team if you're interested." The position offered a significant salary increase and the opportunity to develop tools specifically designed to protect individuals from the kind of surveillance I had experienced. After careful consideration, I accepted, finding unexpected purpose in transforming my painful experience into protection for others. Jessica's career was thriving too. Her design consultancy had landed several major clients, and she was considering bringing on a partner to manage the growing workload. Our professional success, combined with our new home, created a foundation of security that helped heal some of the trust wounds inflicted by my parents. One crisp fall evening, as we sat on our new porch swing, watching the neighborhood children play across the street, Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I've been waiting for the right moment," she said, her voice uncharacteristically nervous. "And I realized there might not be a perfect time, but this feels close." Inside the box was a simple, elegant ring. "I know we've talked about marriage in the abstract," she continued, "but after everything we've been through this year, I'm more certain than ever that you're who I want to build a life with. Will you marry me?" The joy that flooded through me in that moment was untainted by the shadows of the past year. "Yes," I said simply, letting her slide the ring onto my finger before pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like promises and possibility. Tyler was the first person I called with the news, and his genuine happiness for us was another small healing. He had become not just my brother, but my friend. Our relationship recreated on healthier terms now that we were both free from our parents' manipulative dynamics. Our first holiday season in the new house approached with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. The question of whether to include my parents in our celebrations loomed large. "What do you want to do?" Jessica asked as we discussed Thanksgiving plans. "It's completely your call." After much consideration, I decided to host a small gathering that included Tyler and a few close friends, but not my parents. Instead, I sent them a brief but civil card, wishing them well for the holiday. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet. But it was a conscious choice not to let their actions continue to dictate my life choices or emotional well-being. I was building something new, something that honored the strength I discovered in standing up for myself while leaving space for joy, connection, and even eventual healing. As Jessica and I prepared our first Thanksgiving dinner in our new home, surrounded by chosen family, I realized that despite everything, perhaps because of everything, I had found my way to exactly where I was meant to be. 1 year after the court ruling, my life had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. Our house had become a true home, with a vegetable garden in the backyard and walls filled with artwork and photographs. Jessica and I had married in a small ceremony on our property, with Tyler as my person of honor, and a handful of close friends as witnesses. My relationship with my parents remained limited but civil. We had established what my therapist called structured contact, with clear boundaries and expectations. Holiday gatherings were hosted at neutral locations, conversations kept to safe topics, and any attempts to discuss finances or offer unwanted advice were met with a polite but firm redirection. "I'm still working on forgiveness," I told Dr. Reeves during our now monthly sessions. "Not for their benefit, but for mine. Carrying anger takes energy I'd rather direct elsewhere." Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the same patterns to continue, she reminded me. It can simply mean accepting what happened and choosing to move forward without letting it control your present. That perspective helped me navigate the complex emotions that still occasionally surfaced. There were moments when a casual comment or familiar gesture from my mother would trigger a flash of the old hurt and betrayal. But those moments became less frequent, less intense, as I continued to build a life defined by my choices rather than their actions. Tyler had graduated and launched a modest but promising tech startup, funded through a combination of small investors and a grant program for young entrepreneurs. He had made a point of establishing his business completely independent of our parents' financial input, despite their repeated offers of help. "I'm following your example," he told me over dinner, at our house one evening. "Building something that's truly mine." His progress in therapy was evident in the way he now established his own boundaries and pursued his own path without seeming torn by guilt or obligation. We had both learned that family connections, while important, weren't worth sacrificing our autonomy or self-respect. The most unexpected development of the year had been my growing involvement in financial education and digital security awareness. What had begun as a single guest lecture at a local community college, sharing my experience with identity protection students, had evolved into a regular speaking engagement and eventually a workshop series I developed called Digital Boundaries. The workshops combined practical skills for securing personal information with deeper discussions about setting and maintaining boundaries, particularly in family financial dynamics. I partnered with local domestic violence organizations, recognizing that financial control was often an overlooked aspect of abusive relationships. "Your story resonates because it's about more than just money or technology," my co-facilitator, Marissa, explained after a particularly impactful session. "It's about the fundamental right to independence, to build your own life on your own terms." Jessica's design business had grown enough that she had taken on 2 employees and moved to a small office space downtown. Her work brought beauty and function to spaces throughout our city, while my career in cybersecurity allowed me to create protection and peace of mind for vulnerable users. Together, we had created not just a home, but a foundation for meaningful work that extended beyond our own experience, transforming pain into purpose in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after discovering my parents' betrayal. My perspective on family had evolved significantly. I'd come to appreciate that biology offered no guarantees of healthy connection or mutual respect. The most meaningful relationships in my life were now built on choice, trust, and reciprocity, rather than obligation or shared DNA. Family is who sees you clearly and loves you anyway, Jessica said one evening as we hosted a dinner gathering that included Tyler, my closest work colleagues, and friends who had supported us through the legal battle and beyond. Looking around the table at these people who had chosen to show up for me, who had earned my trust and honored my boundaries, I knew she was right. This understanding didn't diminish the complexity of my feelings about my parents. I could acknowledge their formative role in my life, even some positive aspects of my upbringing, while still maintaining the boundaries necessary for my well-being. I could wish them well without allowing them the opportunity to harm me again. On the anniversary of the court ruling, I received an unexpected email from my father. Unlike his previous attempts at communication, which had been defensive or minimizing, this message seemed different from the first line. "I've been doing some difficult reflection," he wrote. "While I still believe our intentions were to protect the family, I've come to recognize that our methods were deeply wrong. The privacy violation and taking your money without permission were inexcusable breaches of trust, regardless of our motivations. I don't expect this acknowledgement to change anything between us, but after a year of therapy of my own, I felt it important to take responsibility for my actions without qualification. I read the message several times, sharing it with Jessica, and discussing it in my next therapy session. It wasn't a magical resolution, not a Hollywood moment of tearful reconciliation, but it was perhaps the first genuine accountability my father had offered in my entire life. I responded briefly, thanking him for the acknowledgement without promising any change in our current arrangement. True repair, if it was ever possible, would require sustained change over time, not a single moment of insight. As I reflect on the journey from that devastating discovery to my life today, I'm struck by how a violation meant to control and diminish me instead catalyzed growth and independence beyond what I had previously imagined possible. The very qualities my parents tried to suppress, my determination and self-reliance, ultimately protected me from the worst of their actions. The most valuable lesson I've learned is that true security comes not from controlling others or being controlled, but from building a life aligned with your own values, surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. Freedom isn't just financial, though that's certainly part of it. It's the ability to define your own path and set your own boundaries, even when, especially when, those closest to you resist. If my story resonates with you in any way, I hope it offers some validation or courage for your own journey. The path to establishing healthy boundaries isn't always straight or easy, particularly with family, but it's worth every difficult step. Have you ever had to set challenging boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for being part of this community where we can grow stronger together.
I'm Emma Parker, 22 years old and the first person in my family to graduate college. After working multiple jobs for 4 years to pay tuition, my big day finally arrived. But instead of proud parents in the audience, I got a last-minute text, "Sorry, honey, the Anderson Super Bowl party was planned months ago." I walked across that stage alone, diploma in hand, smiled for the photographer, then broke down crying in the parking lot. That moment changed everything. Before I share what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been let down by family on your biggest day, hit subscribe and stay with me. Sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most beautiful beginnings. I grew up in Oakwood Heights, a middle-class suburb about 40 minutes outside of Chicago, in a 3-bedroom ranch house with fading blue paint and patchy lawn my father never quite got around to fixing. My dad, Mike, worked construction jobs that kept him busy 6 days a week during good weather months and sporadically employed during winters. Mom, Diane, worked part-time as a receptionist at a local dentist's office, though she frequently called in sick when her favorite TV shows had season finales or when her friend group planned shopping trips. Neither of my parents finished more than high school, with Dad barely graduating and Mom scraping by with C-minuses. Education was never valued in our household. Homework was something to rush through, report cards were glanced at then tossed on the counter without comment, and teacher conferences were attended only when absolutely required, with my parents checking their watches every few minutes. I was different from the start. I devoured books by flashlight under my covers, created science projects without any help, and pushed myself to earn straight A's despite zero encouragement from home. The pattern started early. In 3rd grade, I won the science fair with a project on plant photosynthesis I'd worked on for weeks, but neither parent showed up because Dad had a poker game and Mom didn't want to drive in light rain. In middle school, when I made honor roll every quarter, they skipped the recognition ceremony because their favorite restaurant was having a 2-for-1 special that same night. High school brought more of the same. When I was named valedictorian, they complained about having to sit through a boring ceremony rather than expressing pride. I remember rehearsing my college application essays at our kitchen table while Mom watched reality TV at full volume in the adjacent living room, occasionally yelling at me to keep my voice down. Despite everything, I was determined to break the cycle. I applied to 17 colleges in secret, using fee waivers my guidance counselor helped me find, And when acceptance letters arrived, I hid them in a shoebox under my bed. The day Northwestern University offered me a partial academic scholarship was the first time I allowed myself to truly hope. I rehearsed how I'd tell my parents for hours, practicing responses to their inevitable skepticism. That night, I announced my acceptance over dinner, explaining how the scholarship would cover 60% of tuition. Dad kept eating his meatloaf, barely looking up. College is a waste of money. My buddy's son went for 2 years, and now he's managing the same grocery store he could have worked at right out of high school. Mom at least pretended to be happy, though her first question was whether I'd be commuting so I could continue helping with housework. I spent the next 3 months convincing them college wouldn't bankrupt us, researching student loans myself, applying for every scholarship I could find, and promising I'd work part-time throughout. When move-in day came, Dad helped load my few belongings into our aging minivan, but complained about gas prices the entire 2-hour drive. Mom reminded me 4 times not to waste money on university-branded clothing, because regular clothes are the same thing without the logo. They dropped me off at my dorm with a quick hug and were gone before I'd finished paperwork at the check-in desk, eager to beat weekend traffic back to the suburbs. Standing in my empty half of the dorm room, that August afternoon, I promised myself I'd make every sacrifice worth it. Those 4 years at Northwestern tested every ounce of my determination. First semester freshman year hit like a tidal wave. The academic rigor was beyond anything I'd experienced, with professors who assigned hundreds of pages of reading, weekly and expected thoughtful participation from everyone. Within 2 weeks, I secured a job at the campus cafe, working 30 hours weekly while carrying a full course load. My schedule became a military operation. Classes from morning until mid-afternoon, cafe shifts until closing, then studying until 2 a.m. in the library before starting again. My roommate Lily, a business major from Seattle with emerald green highlights in her dark hair, initially thought I was antisocial until she realized I simply couldn't afford downtime. "You work harder than anyone I've ever met," she said one night, finding me half asleep over economics textbooks. She became my first real friend there, forcing me to take occasional study breaks and leaving encouraging sticky notes on my desk during finals week. I joined a study group with 3 other scholarship students: Jamal, a pre-med student who memorized flashcards on the bus; Tina, a future engineer who could explain calculus concepts like she was telling an interesting story; and Vince, and Bao, accounting major who organized our weekly meetups with color-coded schedules. We bonded over shared financial anxieties and celebrated each other's small victories. My parents rarely entered this new world. During freshman year, I called home weekly, eager to share my experiences. When I excitedly told Mom about acing my first university-level economics exam, she interrupted with a 10-minute story about neighborhood gossip. Dad's responses to my academic achievements were typically, "That's nice," or "Don't let it go to your head." Their questions focused exclusively on whether I was spending too much or if I could send money home for unexpected car repairs. By sophomore year, our calls dwindled to monthly checkups that left me emotionally drained. I added a second job as a research assistant for Professor Bennett in the economics department, which meant transcribing interviews and organizing data 20 hours weekly on top of my cafe shifts and coursework. I subsisted on cafe leftovers and ramen noodles, calculating the exact minimum grocery budget to avoid malnutrition. Junior year, despite my schedule, I joined the First Generation College Students Association, eventually becoming its treasurer. We organized networking events and created a mentorship program, pairing freshmen with upperclassmen who understood their unique challenges. Through bloodshot eyes and perpetual exhaustion, I maintained my GPA above 3.8, making the dean's list every semester. My parents visited campus exactly twice in 4 years, once during freshman orientation because it was required, and once sophomore year when they were driving through Chicago to visit my dad's cousin. Both times they complained about parking costs, rushed through campus tours, and asked when I'd be finishing so I could get a real job. Meanwhile, I watched Lily's parents mail her care packages monthly and drive 6 hours to attend her minor performances in campus theater productions. Jamal's mother called him daily, asking detailed questions about his classes and sending him encouraging texts before each difficult exam. The contrast twisted something in my chest, though I pushed the feeling away, focusing on building my own chosen family. By senior year, I'd secured a prestigious internship with a tech startup in downtown Chicago. Those 20 weekly hours on top of my other 2 jobs meant I slept about 4 hours nightly, but the connections proved invaluable. My supervisor became a mentor who eventually offered me a full-time position at their Seattle headquarters after graduation. When I shared this news with my parents during Thanksgiving break, Dad asked, "Why would you move so far away just for a job?" And Mom complained about Seattle's constant rain. As graduation approached, I tried pushing away creeping anxiety about whether they'd actually attend. "Of course we'll be there," Mom assured me in January. We wouldn't miss our only daughter's big day. I desperately wanted to believe her. Spring semester senior year became a blur of thesis completion, job preparation, and graduation planning. My economics thesis analyzing impact investment strategies in developing markets consumed most of my waking hours, with Professor Bennett pushing me to make it publication-worthy. Simultaneously, my future employer sent weekly onboarding paperwork and training materials, expecting me to complete them alongside my academic responsibilities. Despite everything, anticipatory joy about graduation sustained me. After 17 years of education, thousands of hours studying and working, and countless sacrifices, I would walk across that stage as the first Parker to earn a college degree. 3 months before the ceremony, I mailed formal graduation announcements to my small circle, including an embossed invitation for my parents with ceremony details, campus maps, and nearby restaurant recommendations. Mom called after receiving it unusually enthusiastic. "We've already requested time off work. Dad's even planning to rent a nicer car for the drive-up." This unexpected excitement released tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I immediately booked them a reasonably priced hotel room close to campus, putting the $379 charge on my nearly maxed credit card as an investment in making the weekend special. I reserved a table at Osteria Laguna, an Italian restaurant just fancy enough to feel celebratory without being ostentatious, calculating I could cover dinner if I worked double shifts at the cafe for 2 weekends. Each Sunday night, I called home with graduation updates, counting down the weeks. Just 7 more weeks, can you believe it? Then, only 30 days now. Mom always responded affirmatively, though I noticed her enthusiasm waning slightly with each call. 6 weeks out, she mentioned a potential work conflict for Dad but assured me he'd figure it out. 1 month before, when I called to confirm their hotel reservation details, Mom answered distractedly, asking me to call back later because she was watching a season finale. 5 weeks before graduation, Northwestern sent an email about ordering caps and gowns. I splurged on the higher quality photographs package, imagining the professional shot of me flanked by my proud parents becoming their first framed college memory of me. I ordered 3 ceremony tickets, 1 for each parent and a spare for emergencies, paying the campus printing office to create a decorative holder for them. 2 weeks before the ceremony, during our weekly call, Mom casually mentioned something that stopped my heart. "By the way, honey, there might be a little conflict with your graduation weekend. The Andersons always host this amazing Super Bowl party, and they specifically asked if we'd come this year. I told them we have your thing that weekend, but Linda said they're making Dad's favorite buffalo chicken dip, and everyone from the neighborhood will be there." I sat on my dorm room floor, phone pressed to my ear, struggling to process her words. My graduation wasn't just on Super Bowl weekend. It was scheduled for noon on Sunday, hours before any game would start. "Mom, the ceremony is at noon. The Super Bowl doesn't start until after 6 p.m. You could easily do both," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Oh, but the Andersons' pre-party starts at 2, and it's almost an hour drive back from your school. We'd have to rush, and you know how traffic gets," she replied. "Plus, we'd miss the commercials, which are the best part." My chest tightened as I realized she was actually weighing these options as if they were equivalent. "Mom, this is my college graduation. I've worked 4 years for this. I'm the first person in our family to graduate. Please tell me you're not seriously considering skipping it for a party you could attend any year." Her sigh carried through the phone. "Don't. Be dramatic, Emma. We'll try to make both work, okay? Let me talk to your father and figure something out." That night, I barely slept, staring at the ceiling as anxiety gnawed at my stomach. The week before graduation, I texted daily confirmation requests, receiving increasingly delayed and non-committal responses. I picked up my cap and gown, running my fingers over the smooth fabric while blinking back tears in the campus store. I confirmed my restaurant reservation, reducing it from 4 people to possibly 3. The day before graduation, I cleaned my apartment, prepared a simple breakfast for the morning, and laid out my dress and shoes. My phone remained ominously silent until 10:37 p.m. when it finally rang. Mom's voice came through with forced cheerfulness. "Hi, sweetie, listen, I'm so sorry, but we've decided we just can't make it tomorrow. Your dad threw his back out lifting something heavy, and I'd have to drive alone, and you know how I hate highway driving. Plus, the Andersons are really counting on us bringing the layered taco dip, and Linda would be so disappointed." Each word felt like a physical blow. "You're not coming at all?" I whispered. "It's just one ceremony, honey. They're all the same. Boring speeches and everyone wearing the same outfit. We're really proud of you, you know that. Maybe you can take a video for us? Or see if they sell DVDs of it." I hung up shortly after, unable to continue the conversation through my tears. Sitting alone in my apartment, graduation gown hanging. On my closet door, I allowed myself 30 minutes of sobbing before setting my alarm. Tomorrow would come regardless. Graduation morning dawned bright and clear, early May sunshine streaming through my bedroom blinds as my alarm chirped at 7 a.m. My phone screen showed congratulatory texts from Lily, Jamal, and Professor Bennett, but nothing from my parents. I forced down half a piece of toast while getting ready, my stomach too knotted for proper breakfast. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet as I zipped my dress, applied minimal makeup, and carefully positioned my cap, securing it with extra bobby pins against the spring breeze. Standing before the mirror in my black graduation gown, tassel hanging correctly from the right side, I practiced smiling until it almost looked natural. One last desperate attempt, I called both parents' numbers, reaching voicemail each time. I left a simple message. "It's graduation day. The ceremony starts at noon. I saved you seats. Please come." The university had transformed the main quad into a sea of white folding chairs facing an elevated stage adorned with purple Northwestern banners. Students clustered in nervous, excited groups, adjusting each other's caps and taking photos. Everywhere I looked, proud families embraced graduates, fathers straightening sons' ties, mothers dabbing tears while positioning themselves for perfect pictures. Grandparents hobbled across the lawn with canes and walkers, determined to witness their grandchildren's achievement regardless of physical discomfort. Siblings wore t-shirts with graduates' faces printed on them, holding handmade signs and flower bouquets. I clutched my empty graduation ticket holder, scanning the growing crowd for familiar faces that wouldn't appear. Lily spotted me standing alone and rushed over, her parents following with warm smiles. "Emma, my parents brought you a graduation lei too." She draped the fragrant white flowers around my neck as her mother hugged me impulsively. "We're so proud of you, honey. Lily tells us how hard you've worked." Their kindness nearly broke my composure. I thanked them, making excuses about my parents running late before escaping to the graduate check-in area. We filed into alphabetical order, Professor Martinez helping straighten our lines as we prepared to process in. I kept glancing back at the family seating area, heart jumping whenever I saw someone with my mother's hair color or my father's build, then sinking again with each mistaken identity. The ceremony began with pomp and circumstance echoing across the quad as we marched to our seats. Throughout the university president's welcome and the keynote speaker's address, I continued searching the crowd, squinting against the sunlight to examine each late arrival. As the economics department graduates were called, my brow stood and moved toward the stage steps. 4 people ahead of me, my phone vibrated in the pocket I'd sewn inside my gown. Pulling it out quickly, I saw a Facebook notification. My mother had posted new photos tagged Anderson Super Bowl pre-party prep, showing our kitchen counter covered with snack platters and beer coolers. Timestamp? 18 minutes ago. I shoved the phone away as my name echoed through the speakers. Emma Louise Parker, Bachelor of Science in Economics, summa cum laude. Walking across that stage took every ounce of strength I possessed. I shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma case, and smiled for the photographer as instructed, hearing only scattered applause where other graduates had received enthusiastic cheers. From the corner of my eye, I spotted Lily and her parents, standing, clapping vigorously from their seats. Jamal's entire extended family whistled from the back row. I returned to my seat, diploma clutched tightly, breathing slowly to control tears threatening to escape. After the ceremony ended and mortarboards flew skyward, the quad transformed into a celebration zone. Families swarmed graduates, cameras flashed continuously, and laughter mingled with happy tears. I stood awkwardly at the periphery, watching the scene unfold like a movie I wasn't cast in. Lily found me quickly, insisting I join her family photos. "Get in here, Parker. You're honorary family today." Her father positioned me beside Lily. Her mother straightened my honors cords, and they took several shots before handing me their contact information to receive the pictures later. Jamal's mother pressed a card into my hand with a generous gift card inside, whispering that she was so impressed with anyone graduating debt-free through hard work. Their kindness, while genuine, highlighted the absence I couldn't ignore. After 30 minutes of forced smiles and declining various family lunch invitations, I made excuses about meeting my parents elsewhere. Walking rapidly across campus toward the parking lot, vision blurring, I barely made it to my car before the first sob escaped. Sitting behind the wheel of my 15-year-old Honda, still wearing my graduation gown, I finally released the grief I'd been holding back. Tears streamed down my face as I pounded the steering wheel, years of disappointment culminating in this ultimate rejection. Between gasping breaths, I scrolled through my phone to find another photo my mother had posted, a selfie with neighborhood. Friends, red plastic cups raised toward the camera, captioned, "Super Bowl Sunday is better than any ceremony." The timestamp showed it was posted during the exact moment I'd walked across the stage. Something broke inside me then. Some final thread of hope that perhaps they had cared all along but simply showed it differently. Wiping mascara from my cheeks with my graduation gown sleeve, I started the car and drove away from campus, leaving behind both my university years and my illusions about family. Sunday evening found me alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-packed moving boxes, takeout containers from the celebratory dinner Lily had insisted on bringing me before leaving with her parents. I'd smiled through our meal, assuring her I was fine, that I understood my parents' absence, that I wasn't really that upset. The moment her car pulled away, my carefully maintained facade crumbled. I spent hours alternating between crying and staring blankly at the wall, replaying not just this disappointment, but years of similar moments. Elementary school art shows, where my drawing hung unviewed, high school awards nights when I accepted certificates while scanning empty audience chairs, college acceptance letters met with indifference. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams where I walked across endless stages looking for faces that never appeared. Monday morning, my phone chimed with a text from Mom. "How did your graduation thing go? Did they take good pictures?" No acknowledgement of their absence, no apology, not even a congratulations. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, "It was important to me. I really wanted you and Dad there. It hurt that you chose a party instead." Her response came quickly. "Don't be so sensitive. These ceremonies are all the same anyway. Your cousin Becky skipped her own graduation because they're so boring. It's just walking across a stage, not like you performed brain surgery." Anyway, the party was really fun. The Andersons had this amazing 7-layer dip. I set my phone down, too emotionally exhausted to explain why her response deepened rather than healed the wound. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a blur of apartment cleaning, donation sorting, and job preparation. My parents didn't call, and I lacked the energy to reach out. On Thursday afternoon, 3 days after graduation, my phone displayed my father's number, the first time he'd called directly in months. A small, foolish hope flickered in my chest. Perhaps they'd realized their mistake. Maybe they were finally calling to apologize, to acknowledge the milestone they'd missed. I answered with cautious optimism. "Hi, Dad." "Hey, kiddo," he replied, using the childhood nickname that had once made me feel special. "Your mother and I were talking, and we wanted to check in on you. Getting all settled with that new job?" The conversation started normally enough. Surface-level questions about my apartment, when I'd be moving, whether Seattle weather would bother me. I began to relax slightly, telling myself perhaps this was their way of making amends. Then came the pivot I should have anticipated. So listen, Emma. The real reason I'm calling is we've got a bit of a situation at home. The dishwasher flooded the kitchen floor yesterday, and when the plumber came, he found all kinds of issues with the pipes. Turns out we need about $3,000 worth of repairs, and our credit cards are maxed out right now. The familiar sinking feeling returned to my stomach as he continued. We figured since you'll be starting that fancy job soon, maybe you could help your old man out with a loan. You can probably get one of those low-interest graduate loans or something, right? We'd pay you back eventually, of course. I sat on my bed, stunned into silence. Not only had they missed the most important day of my academic life for a party, but their first contact afterward was to ask for money. No congratulations. No acknowledgement of my achievement. Just another withdrawal from an emotional bank account that had been in overdraft for years. Emma, you still there? Dad prompted. I'm here, I replied quietly. I'm just surprised. I haven't even started my job yet. I don't get my first paycheck for almost a month, and I have to pay first and last month's rent on a Seattle apartment, plus moving expenses. Well, your mother mentioned you got some graduation money from relatives. Maybe you could use that? After everything we've done for you, putting a roof over your head all those years, it seems like you could help out the family a little. That's what family does. My throat tightened. I need to think about it. I'll call you back. I hung up before he could pressure me further, then sat motionless, phone clutched in my hand. The sheer audacity of their request crystallized. Years of similar patterns I'd normalized or excused. Growing up, I'd interpreted their behavior as busy parents doing their best. In college, I told myself they simply didn't understand academia. Now, with painful clarity, I recognized the one-way nature of our relationship. I was expected to accommodate their needs while mine remained permanently secondary. The next morning, I called the University Counseling Center, where graduating. Seniors still had access to services for 1 month post-graduation. The counselor, Dr. Martinez, listened attentively as I described both the graduation absence and the financial request. Emma, what you're describing sounds like a pattern of emotional neglect, she said gently. Your feelings of hurt and betrayal are completely valid. The question now is what boundaries you need to set for your own well-being. We discussed healthy family dynamics versus obligation-based relationships, the difference between helping family and enabling harmful patterns. For the first time, I verbalized a thought that had lurked beneath the surface for years. Perhaps maintaining close ties with my parents wasn't mandatory. Perhaps distance, both geographic and emotional, might be the healthiest choice. Dr. Martinez helped me draft scripts for setting boundaries, emphasizing that I shouldn't make decisions from guilt or obligation. As I left her office, phone notification showing 3 missed calls from my mother, I felt the weight of an imminent decision. Would I continue the cycle of disappointment and one-sided giving, or would I finally prioritize my own well-being? That night became one of the longest of my life, sleeplessness punctuated by racing thoughts and unexpected tears. I lay awake replaying the counseling session, mentally cataloging every significant parental disappointment from my childhood through graduation. Around 3 a.m., I found myself creating a balance sheet in my economics-trained mind. Emotional investments versus returns, patterns of behavior, predictive indicators for future interactions. By dawn, exhaustion had cleared away any remaining illusions. I'd spent my entire life seeking approval from people constitutionally incapable of providing it. My laptop glowed in the pre-dawn darkness as I researched one-way flights to Seattle. My new job wasn't scheduled to begin for 3 weeks, but the company had mentioned flexibility. An early morning email to my future supervisor, Natalie, explained my situation in professional terms. Due to unexpected changes in my housing situation, I'm wondering if it might be possible to start slightly earlier than our agreed-upon date. Her response arrived while I was showering. Absolutely. We'd love to have you sooner. We offer 2 weeks of corporate housing for relocating employees. Let me know your preferred arrival date, and I'll make arrangements. A strange lightness filled my chest, the sensation of chains loosening. I opened my banking app, reviewing my meager savings, $1,237 in my checking account, plus $820 in graduation gifts from relatives and professors. Combined with the corporate housing offer, it would be enough for a security deposit and modest furniture. I booked a one-way ticket to Seattle for the following Tuesday, the soonest date that allowed me to properly pack and ship my belongings. The ticket confirmation email felt like a declaration of independence. Lily returned from her family's post-graduation trip that afternoon. I explained my accelerated plans over coffee at our kitchen counter. "Wow, that's fast," she said, eyes widening. "But honestly, after what your parents did, I completely understand you wanting a fresh start." She helped me research shipping options for my books and winter clothes, offering to store anything I couldn't immediately take. "What about your parents?" she eventually asked. "Have you told them?" I shook my head. "I'm going to text them once. Everything's finalized. I'm not ready for another phone call right now." That evening, I composed the hardest message I'd ever written. "Mom and Dad, I've decided to move to Seattle next week to start my new position earlier than planned. I'm not in a financial position to help with the house repairs. I need some space to process everything, including your absence at graduation. I'll send my new address once I'm settled." Their response came within minutes, my mother calling. Repeatedly, my father sending increasingly agitated texts. "This is how you treat family? After everything we've done for you? You're being selfish and ungrateful." The final message struck deepest. "If you leave like this, don't expect us to welcome you back when that job doesn't work out." For the first time, their words didn't devastate me. Instead, they confirmed I was making the right choice. I silenced notifications from their numbers and focused on packing, sorting through 4 years of college life, deciding what deserved space in my new beginning. The weekend passed in a flurry of activity, donating furniture to incoming international students, shipping 8 boxes of books and winter clothes, cleaning my apartment to ensure full security deposit return. Lily and our friend group organized an impromptu goodbye dinner Sunday night at our favorite pizza place. "To Emma," Jamal toasted, raising his soda glass, "who's brave enough to chase her dreams 3,000 miles away." Tina presented me with a Seattle guidebook, each friend having marked their recommended spots in different colored highlighters. Vince had created a detailed spreadsheet of Seattle neighborhoods with cost of living comparisons. These people, who'd shown up for my presentations, celebrated my achievements, supported my challenges, represented what real support looked like. That night, as I prepared to sleep on a borrowed air mattress in my empty bedroom, I unblocked my parents' numbers long enough to send one final message. "I'm leaving Tuesday morning. I need time and space to build my own life. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Then I turned off my phone completely, unwilling to let their response affect my resolve. Monday brought final errands, closing my local bank account, picking up my official diploma from campus administration, getting a haircut for job interviews. I walked through campus one last time, saying goodbye to classrooms where I'd discovered my academic passion and the library corners where I'd studied through countless nights. Standing before the economics building, I silently thanked Professor Bennett for believing in my potential when I'd barely believed in myself. "Making a run for it, huh?" The voice behind me belonged to Professor Bennett herself, campus coffee in hand, observing me with knowing eyes. "Starting fresh," I corrected, managing a smile. "Seattle's lucky to get you, Parker. I've recommended plenty of students to companies over the years, but few with your determination." She handed me her business card with a personal email written on the back. "Keep in touch. I expect great things." Her simple acknowledgement of my worth felt more validating than any recognition my parents could have offered. Tuesday morning arrived with unexpected clarity. I woke before my alarm, packed my remaining possessions into 2 suitcases, and called a rideshare to the airport. As the car pulled away from my apartment building, I didn't look back. The university campus, the coffee shop where I'd worked, countless shifts, the economics building where I'd discovered my passion, all receded in the rear window. Ahead lay uncertainty, yes, but also possibility unshackled from expectations I could never meet. My phone remained off until I reached my gate at O'Hare Airport. When I finally powered it on, dozens of notifications appeared, mostly supportive, messages from friends, but also several missed calls from my parents. I deleted their voicemails without listening. As boarding began for my flight to Seattle, I posted a simple social media update. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter. Seattle bound." The accompanying photo showed only my hand holding my boarding pass, engagement ring conspicuously absent from my finger. I'd returned it to Jason 3 days earlier, another difficult but necessary unburdening. As the plane accelerated down the runway, I felt myself lifting not just physically but emotionally, rising above patterns too deeply entrenched to change, soaring toward a horizon where I could finally define success on my own terms. The plane touched down at SeaTac Airport under typical Pacific Northwest skies, pearlescent gray clouds occasionally parting to reveal stunning mountain views before closing again like theater curtains. With just 2 suitcases containing my most essential belongings, I navigated to ground transportation feeling strangely unburdened. My company-arranged car service driver held a sign reading, Parker Technovate Inc., the first time I'd seen my name displayed with professional recognition. The driver, Amara, chatted amiably during our 40-minute journey downtown, pointing out landmarks and offering practical tips about Seattle living. "First time in the city?" she asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "First time starting?" "Completely fresh," I replied, watching raindrops race down the window glass. The corporate apartment exceeded my expectations. A furnished studio on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The kitchenette contained basic cookware and a welcome basket with Seattle, coffee, artisan chocolate, and a handwritten note from Natalie. "Welcome to Seattle and Technovate. Can't wait to have you on board." I spent that first evening unpacking my limited possessions and watching ferries cross the water against the backdrop of a spectacular sunset that painted the sky in gradient shades of orange and purple. My phone occasionally lit up with texts from college friends checking on my arrival, but nothing from my parents since I'd blocked their numbers before departure. The silence felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. My first day at Technovate began with new hire orientation, where I met 4 other recent graduates joining various departments. The company culture immediately struck me as different from previous workplaces. The CEO personally welcomed each new employee, sharing the company's origin story and vision with genuine enthusiasm. My department manager, Corinne, spent an hour discussing my role as a financial analyst, emphasizing growth opportunities rather than just immediate responsibilities. My desk featured a small welcome pack with company-branded items and a list of lunch spots within walking distance. "First week tradition, new hires don't eat alone," explained Jordan, a fellow analyst who joined the company 6 months earlier. Tall with curly black hair and rectangular glasses, Jordan appointed himself my unofficial Seattle guide. "Mandatory coffee run at 3 when the afternoon slump hits," he informed me, stopping by my desk precisely at 3 each day that first week. Through Jordan, I met other young professionals in the building. Aisha from marketing, who organized weekend hiking trips. Marcus from IT, who ran a board game night. Deepika from legal, who taught yoga classes Saturday mornings. I initially declined their invitations using apartment hunting as my excuse, but Jordan persisted. "Seattle's a hard city to crack socially," he warned over Friday lunch. "Rain keeps people indoors half the year. If you don't make connections now, winter gets lonely." Recognizing wisdom in his warning, I joined their Saturday exploration of Pike Place Market, discovering food stalls and artisan shops while learning Seattle's intricate neighborhood geography. My temporary housing arrangement gave me 2 weeks to find permanent accommodation. Evenings and the first weekend became dedicated to apartment hunting in neighborhoods Jordan had recommended. Capitol Hill attracted me with its vibrant energy and walkability, though prices initially seemed daunting. A stroke of luck came when Deepika mentioned her building had a vacancy, a small one-bedroom in a 1920s brick building with character details like crown molding and hardwood floors. The location allowed me to walk to work, saving transportation costs, and the landlord proved flexible on deposit timing when I explained my new job situation. Moving in required creative budgeting. I purchased only essential furniture from secondhand stores and discount retailers, creating a spare but functional space that felt entirely mine. My parents' attempts at contact continued sporadically, text messages alternating between guilt tactics, "Can't believe you'd abandon your family like this," and financial pressure, "The plumber needs payment by Friday." Each message I read, but didn't respond to, strengthened my resolve. With Dr. Martinez's counseling guidance still fresh, I practiced setting mental boundaries even when physical ones were in place. 1 month into Seattle, life came a significant milestone, my first proper paycheck. The direct deposit notification on my phone represented more than financial compensation. It symbolized independence earned through years of sacrifice and determination. That evening, I walked to a local bank branch and opened both checking and savings accounts, allocating 15% of my income to emergency savings, rather than sending money home as I'd always assumed I would. Following my onboarding session, with HR, I also enrolled in the company's 401k plan with maximum matching contribution, something my parents had always dismissed as money you won't see until you're too old to enjoy it. 3-month performance reviews arrived faster than expected. Sitting in Corinne's office, I nervously awaited feedback on my initial projects and analyses. "I'm impressed, Emma," she began, referencing specific reports I'd compiled. "You have exceptional attention to detail while still maintaining big-picture perspective. That's rare in new analysts." The conversation concluded with unexpected news: a small role expansion and corresponding salary adjustment. "We typically don't revisit compensation until the 6-month mark, but your work quality warrants acceleration," Corinne explained. Walking back to my desk, I fought the urge to call my parents with this achievement. Their validation, I reminded myself, had always come with conditions I could never quite meet. Instead, I texted Jordan and my growing friend circle, who celebrated with impromptu happy hour drinks after work. My apartment gradually transformed from merely functional to genuinely personal. Weekend flea market visits yielded affordable artwork for previously bare walls. A small secondhand bookshelf began filling with economics texts and fiction recommendations from colleagues. I hung twinkle lights around my bedroom window and splurged on quality bedding, small luxuries previously deemed unnecessary. On my nightstand sat the only physical reminder of Northwestern, a framed photo of graduation day with Lily and her parents, my departmental honors cords visible against black robes. My parents remained conspicuously absent from my displayed memories, existing only in the occasional thoughts I couldn't entirely banish. 6 months into Seattle life, during a Sunday morning walk through my neighborhood's farmer's market, realization, struck with unexpected clarity, I felt genuinely happy. Not the conditional happiness I'd always pursued through achievement or validation, but contentment rooted in daily experiences. Morning coffee at my window, watching ferries cross the Sound, stimulating work challenges, growing friendships with people who appreciated me without agenda. The life I was building aligned with my values rather than expectations imposed by others. That evening, I wrote in my journal, "Home isn't necessarily where you're from. Sometimes it's where you finally feel permission to become yourself." 6 months and 3 weeks into my Seattle life, an unexpected name illuminated my phone screen during a Tuesday morning meeting: Mom. I excused myself, heart racing, and stepped into the hallway. Answering felt like reopening a healing wound, but silence wasn't sustainable forever. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Emma? Is that really you?" Mom's voice sounded simultaneously familiar and foreign. "We weren't sure you'd pick up. It's been so long." Small talk followed, awkward exchanges about Seattle weather, my apartment, their home repairs apparently completed through a neighbor's connection. Then came the announcement. "Your father and I have been talking. We want to visit you in Seattle next month. We found reasonably priced flights." The statement landed like a boulder in still water, rippling through my carefully constructed piece. "Visit? Here?" I managed, mind racing through implications. "Why now?" "You're our daughter, Emma. We miss you. And we've never seen Seattle." Something in her tone, the carefully casual mention of missing me sandwiched between practical details, triggered old suspicions. "I'd need to check my work schedule," I stalled. "I'm pretty busy with projects right now." Several more calls followed over subsequent days, each increasing the pressure subtly. "We've already looked at hotels," Dad mentioned. "Though they're awfully expensive in the city, maybe we could stay with you?" I held firm on separate accommodations, recommending a moderately priced hotel near Pike Place. Eventually, we settled on dates 3 weeks away, a Friday through Monday visit that would minimize my needed time off work. I spent those intervening weeks in a state of anxious preparation, both practical and emotional. Jordan listened patiently to my concerns over lunch. "Just remember, this is your territory now," he advised. "You get to set the terms." My therapist, Dr. Chen, whom I'd been seeing bi-weekly since month 2 in Seattle, helped me establish boundaries and rehearse responses to potential triggers. The morning of their arrival, I cleaned my apartment needlessly. They wouldn't be staying there, yet old habits resurfaced automatically. I met them at their hotel lobby, the first in-person contact in over 7 months. Mom looked older somehow. More lines around her eyes, hair colored a shade too dark for her complexion. Dad had gained weight, his familiar company polo straining across his middle. Awkward hugs followed, then immediate complaints about their flight delay, the hotel check-in process, Seattle's confusing one-way streets. "This hotel is highway robbery," Dad grumbled while arranging his keycard and wallet. $200. A night for a room barely bigger than your bedroom at home. We could have saved all that money staying with you. Mom elbowed him subtly but agreed. It is awfully expensive just for sleeping. Old patterns emerged instantly. Their expectations that I'd manage their experience, absorb their complaints, prioritize their comfort above all else. I suggested a late lunch at a nearby restaurant known for Pacific Northwest specialties, hoping shared food might ease tensions. Throughout the meal, they peppered me with surface-level questions about my job without seeming to register my answers, interrupting explanations of financial analysis models to comment on menu prices or nearby diners' conversations. When the check arrived, Dad pointedly waited until I reached for it. "Well, you're the one with the fancy corporate job now," he said with a tight smile. The next day included standard tourist activities: Pike Place Market, the Space Needle, a harbor, cruise. Each venue prompted similar reactions: complaints about prices, crowds, weather that wasn't quite perfect. My apartment tour elicited scrutiny rather than appreciation. "This is what you pay 4 times our mortgage for?" Mom asked, examining my modest space. "And you don't even have a proper dining table." Dad opened my refrigerator without asking, commenting on my expensive organic food with disapproval. Dinner that evening at a mid-range restaurant downtown marked the inevitable turning point. After ordering, Mom casually mentioned exciting opportunities back home they wanted to discuss. Dad leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Johnson from my construction crew, you remember him? His brother-in-law is starting a property development company. They're looking for investors. Initial buy-in is just $5,000, but the returns could be massive." My stomach tightened as he continued. "We figured with your financial background you'd recognize a good opportunity. Plus, you could advise us on the paperwork side." The truth crystallized with painful clarity. This visit wasn't about reconciliation, but fundraising. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt strangely calm, as though final confirmation of a long-suspected diagnosis brought relief rather than shock. "So this visit is about money?" I asked directly, interrupting his investment pitch. Both looked genuinely surprised at my bluntness. "Of course not," Mom protested. "We came to see you. This is just something we thought might interest you." "Really?" I maintained steady eye contact. "Because you haven't asked a single question about my life here. You haven't commented on my promotion or asked about my friends or shown interest in anything I'm building, but you've complained about prices constantly and now you're asking for investment money." Dad's expression hardened. "That's completely unfair. We flew across the country to see you after you abandoned us without a word. I sent multiple messages before leaving. You missed my college graduation for a Super Bowl party, then immediately asked me for money." Saying these truths, aloud in a public place, felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "We're your parents," Mom hissed, glancing around to ensure neighboring tables couldn't hear. "You owe us respect, if nothing else." "Respect is earned," I replied quietly. "It requires mutual consideration. I respect myself enough now to recognize when I'm being used." Dad pushed back his chair abruptly. "If that's how you feel about family, maybe we made a mistake coming here." I nodded slowly. "Maybe you did." I signaled the waiter for the check, paid it without discussion, and walked out into the rainy Seattle evening alone. Back in my apartment, shaking with adrenaline, I received a barrage of text messages. "How dare you embarrass us like that? After everything we've sacrificed for you." The final message held familiar, manipulative weight. "We need a ride to the airport tomorrow morning since we can't afford Seattle's outrageous taxi prices." My response was simple. "There's a light rail station 3 blocks from your hotel that goes directly to the airport. It costs $3.25 per person." I silenced notifications afterward. made myself tea, and stood at my window watching fairy lights cross the darkened Sound. The next morning, my parents checked out a day early, sending a final message that they were changing their flights to return home immediately since, clearly, you don't want us here. No contact followed for several weeks, the longest complete silence since my move. When my mother finally texted again with a terse, "We arrived home safely despite the inconvenience," I responded with equal brevity, "Glad you arrived safely." That exchange marked a turning point. Not the reconciliation they'd potentially envisioned, nor the complete severance I'd occasionally considered, but a distant relationship conducted on new terms. The visit, painful as it was, had clarified something essential. I could acknowledge my parents as part of my history without allowing them to determine my future. Exactly 1 year after graduation, I celebrated by taking a solo day trip to Mount Rainier National Park. The timing felt significant. 12 months since walking across that stage alone, 12 months of building independence 3,000 miles from where my story began. The mountain revealed itself intermittently through cloud breaks as I hiked the Skyline Trail, its massive presence simultaneously humbling and inspiring. Sitting on a rock outcropping overlooking vast wilderness, I reflected on my journey. Not just geographic relocation, but emotional evolution. The weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Chen had gradually tapered to bi-weekly, then monthly check-ins. Through her guidance, I'd begun unpacking childhood patterns of seeking approval from sources constitutionally incapable of providing it. The hardest grief, she'd explained during one particularly breakthrough session, isn't losing what you had, but losing what you never had, and finally accepting you never will. This concept, mourning the supportive parents I'd never actually had rather than the real ones I'd left behind, shifted something fundamental in my healing process. I'd built a chosen family in Seattle that constantly surprised me with its genuine support. Jordan had become my closest friend, introducing me to hiking groups and music venues, helping me navigate Seattle's social landscape. My technical mentor at work, Prisha, regularly invited me to family dinners where her children showed me their schoolwork with the same enthusiasm my parents had never shown for mine. Deepika from legal had become a workout partner and confidant, sharing her own complex family history over post-yoga brunches. My professional growth at Technovate had exceeded expectations. 10 months into my role, I'd been promoted to lead analyst for our sustainability investment division, now managing a small team analyzing environmental impact bonds and green energy portfolios. The promotion came with educational benefits I was using to pursue advanced certification in sustainable finance. My apartment had transformed from sparse necessity to genuine home. Walls adorned with local artists' work, bookshelves filled with both professional resources and fiction, a small balcony garden thriving despite my novice gardening skills. Most significantly, I'd established financial independence with clearly defined boundaries. After the failed visit, I'd created structured parameters for family financial interaction. Birthday and Christmas cards contained modest gift cards, never cash. Occasional care packages included practical items but never monetary assistance. Automatic responses greeted any direct requests for loans or investments. My contact with parents had settled into a predictable pattern, monthly phone calls lasting exactly 30 minutes, surface-level exchanges about weather and neighborhood happenings, no discussion of finances or past grievances. I maintained control over these interactions through scheduled timing and prepared talking points, ending calls promptly when old patterns emerged. This arrangement wasn't ideal family connection, but it represented significant progress from both complete estrangement and toxic entanglement. The most profound change resided within me, recognizing that parenthood exists through actions, not merely biology. My parents had contributed genetic material and basic survival necessities, but the nurturing, guidance, and unconditional support that define true parenting had come from mentors, friends, and ultimately, myself. Sitting on that mountainside, watching eagles soar on thermal currents, I acknowledged the complex truth that setting boundaries wasn't selfishness, but self-preservation. The graduation photos finally displayed on my bookshelf weren't the family portraits I'd once imagined, but images with Lily's family and my economics professors, people who'd shown up not from obligation, but genuine care. A year into my Seattle life, I'd begun paying forward the support I'd received by mentoring first-generation college students through a local nonprofit. Meeting monthly with Seattle area teens navigating college applications without family guidance, I shared practical advice about scholarships, work-study balance, and financial aid forms. More importantly, I offered living proof that family limitations needn't determine future possibilities. Sometimes the families we're born into aren't equipped to nurture our particular dreams, I told Marissa, a brilliantly talented young artist whose parents discouraged her creative pursuits. That doesn't mean your dreams aren't valid or achievable. Mountain shadows lengthened as afternoon progressed toward evening. I packed my hiking gear and began the descent, each step reinforcing a truth I was still learning to fully embrace. Sometimes the most loving choice in a relationship is distance. Space that allows both parties to be authentic, rather than perpetuating harmful patterns. The weight I'd carried wasn't just expectations I couldn't meet, but the exhausting performance of pretending those expectations were reasonable. Relinquishing that burden hadn't just allowed me to walk away, it had given me wings to soar toward authentic connection and purpose. As I drove back toward Seattle, sunset painted Olympic mountains in gold and purple against darkening sky. My phone contained 3 missed calls from my mother about a neighbor's new fence encroaching 6 inches onto their property. Tomorrow I would return that call, maintaining the boundaries that protected my hard-won peace while still acknowledging our connection. Tonight, however, belonged to celebration. 1 full year of choosing myself, 1 full year of building. A life aligned with my values rather than defined by others' limitations. That night, standing on my small balcony watching fairy lights cross Puget Sound, I posted my first graduation photo publicly. Me in cap and gown with Lily's family, genuinely smiling despite red-rimmed eyes. The caption read simply, "1 year later, I understand that sometimes walking alone across a stage isn't failure, but the first step toward finding your true path." Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to read your stories in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't staying. It's having the courage to walk away from situations that continually hurt you, even when those situations involve people you love. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life journeys, and share with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own healing. Thank you for walking this path with me today.